Commander Jake Morrison pushed through the airlock door and stepped into the alien ship. The metal floor made soft clicking sounds under his boots. Emergency red lights flashed on and off, making everything look scary and strange. The air smelled wrong, like chemicals and something rotten. "Lisa, stay close," he said to Dr. Lisa Carter, who walked behind him. She carried her scanner in both hands, watching the small screen that showed green numbers dancing up and down. "The readings are strange, Jake," she said in a quiet voice. "This ship is using a lot of power, but it's not moving anywhere. Why would they need so much energy if they're just floating in space?" Lieutenant Ben Crawford spoke through their radio. His voice sounded far away and full of static. "Commander, I'm seeing weird stuff on the ship's computers. There are areas down below that use more power than the engines. That doesn't make sense." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. They had come here to find the missing colony ship, Bright Star. 3,000 people had been traveling to a new world when they just disappeared. No radio calls, no emergency signals, nothing. Then this alien ship showed up in the same area, just sitting there like it was waiting for something. The Zephyrians were supposed to be friends of Earth. They had pretty blue skin and 6 arms, and they always smiled when they talked to humans. They helped humans build new homes on other planets. They shared their medicine and their technology. Jake's own sister Mary lived on a Zephyrian world with her husband and 2 kids. "Commander, you need to see this," Lisa said. Her voice sounded. Scared Jake walked over to where she stood in front of a big metal door. The door had symbols on it that looked like the Zephyrian language, but these symbols were different somehow. They seemed to glow with their own light. "What is it?" Jake asked. "My scanner says there are life signs behind this door." "Lots of them?" "And Jake, they're human life signs." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. "How many?" Lisa looked at her. "Scatter again." Her hands were shaking a little. "I count over 200. Maybe more. They're all alive, but their brain activity is very low. Like they're sleeping, but not normal sleep." Jake pressed his hand against the door. It felt warm, warmer than the rest of the ship. "Ben, can you hack into their door controls from the bridge?" "Working on it, Commander. Give me 2 minutes." Jake waited, but each second felt like an hour. Lisa kept looking at her scanner, and her face got more worried every time she checked it. "Jake, these readings are really strange. The humans behind this door, their bodies are working, but barely. It's like they're being kept alive by machines." The door made a soft hissing sound and then slid open. Jake and Lisa stepped through, into a huge room that was darker than the hallway. The red emergency lights here were dimmer, and Jake had to wait for his eyes to get used to the darkness. Then he saw them. Rows and rows of clear containers filled the room. Each container was about as big as a bed, and each one had a person floating inside. Blue-green liquid surrounded the people, and tubes went into their arms and mouths. The people's eyes were closed, and they floated like they were underwater. Jake walked to the nearest container. Inside was a young woman with brown hair. She looked about 20 years old. She wore a simple white dress that moved slowly in the liquid. A tube in her mouth helped her breathe, and wires stuck to her head. "My God," Lisa whispered. She ran her scanner over the container. "Jake, she's alive, but she's not really here. Her brain is barely working, just enough to keep her body alive." Jake moved to the next container. This one held a man about 30 years old. The next one had a teenage boy. Then an older woman. All of them floating in the blue-green liquid, all of them with tubes and wires attached to their bodies. "Lisa, what is this? What are they doing to these people?" Lisa's scanner made beeping sounds as she checked container after container. "The liquid is keeping their bodies healthy, but their minds are turned off. It's like they're in a coma, but it's not natural. Something is making them stay asleep. Jake walked between the rows of containers. There were hundreds of them. Men, women, children, old people, young people. All of them floating, all of them asleep, all of them human. "Commander," Ben's voice came through the radio, but he sounded different now. "Scared. We have a problem. I've been looking at these ships. Computer files. Jake, this isn't a rescue ship. It's not a research ship either." "What is it, Ben?" "It's a cargo ship. And according to these files, the cargo is human beings. They're not passengers, Commander. They're listed as property." Jake felt like someone had hit him in the stomach. "Say that again." "The computer files. Call them biological assets. Each person has a number and a price. Jake, they're being sold." Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "That's impossible. The Zephyrians are our allies. They wouldn't do this." But even as she said it, Jake could see in her eyes that she was starting to understand the truth, just like he was. "Ben, how many ships like this one are there?" "According to the main computer, this is ship number 47 in something called the Collection Fleet. There are files here about dozens of human colonies that have gone missing over the past 20 years. Jake looked around the huge room full of sleeping humans. His hands turned into fists. "The Bright Star Colony. Are they here?" "I'm checking the manifest now." "Yes, Commander. All 3,000 people from the Bright Star are listed as cargo. On this ship and 2 others nearby." Jake felt anger growing inside him like a fire. The Zephyrians had not just taken one ship full of people. They had been doing this for 20 years. Taking humans from their homes, putting them to sleep, and selling them like animals. "Lisa, can we wake these people up?" Lisa studied her scanner readings. "I don't know. The chemicals in the liquid are keeping them unconscious. If we try to wake them up too fast, we might hurt them or kill them." "Commander," Ben said through the radio, "we have another problem. 3 Zephyrian ships just showed up. Big ones. They're trying to talk to us." Jake looked at all the sleeping humans around him. Somewhere in this room might be people he knew. People from Earth. People with families who missed them and wondered what happened to them. "Tell the Zephyrians we're doing a routine inspection." Jake said into his radio, "Don't let them know we found anything." "What are you planning, Jake?" Lisa asked. Jake walked to a computer terminal on the wall. The screen showed Zephyrian writing, but there were also human words, names and ages and places where people came from. Like a shopping list. "I'm planning to copy every file on this ship. Every name, every number, every record of what they've done. Then I'm planning to go home and tell everyone on Earth exactly what our friends, the Zephyrians, really are." Lisa nodded. "How long do you need?" 10 minutes to copy everything. Then we get out of here and never trust an alien again." As Jake worked at the computer, downloading 20 years of evidence about humanity's greatest betrayal, he looked at the sleeping faces in their containers. They trusted the Zephyrians too. They thought they were going to new homes, new lives, new futures. Instead, they got this. But Jake promised himself that this was not the end of their story. This was just the beginning of the war that would follow. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in the big meeting room deep under the Pentagon building. The room had no windows, and the walls were thick metal that could stop any kind of listening device. Around the long table sat the most important military people on Earth. All of them looked angry and scared at the same time. The big screen on the wall showed pictures from Jake Morrison's mission. Humans floating in tanks. Computer files with names and prices. Ships full of people being sold like cattle. Kate had watched these pictures 50 times in the past 3 days, but they still made her stomach feel sick. General Frank Rodriguez hit the table with his fist. How did we not know? How did we miss this for 20 years? Dr. Amy Foster sat across from him. looking at papers spread out in front of her. She studied alien behavior and had worked with many different species from other worlds. The Zephyrians are very good at lying, she said. They smile and act friendly, but they think of us as animals. Smart animals, but still just animals. Kate looked at the numbers on her tablet. Each number was a human being taken from their family. Amy, how many people are we talking about? Based on the files Morrison found, about 2.5 million. Humans are missing. They've been taking people from colonies, research stations, even passenger ships. Anyone who traveled away from Earth was in danger. Captain Nick Parker, who ran the Colonial Defense Force, stood up and walked to the big screen. 2.5 million people. That's more than live in most cities. And we just let it happen. We didn't know, Kate said, but the words felt empty. The Zephyrians told us the colonies failed because of disease or accidents. They showed us fake reports. They even brought us bodies to prove people had died. Dr. Foster picked up one of her papers. The bodies were real, but they weren't from colony failures. According to these medical files, the Zephyrians have been experimenting on humans for decades. When people died during the experiments, they used the bodies to fake colony disasters. The room went quiet. Kate could hear the air conditioning and the soft hum of computers, but nobody spoke for a long minute. What kind of experiments? General Rodriguez asked, but his voice was very quiet. Dr. Foster looked like she didn't want to answer. Brain studies, mostly. They're trying to understand how humans think differently from other species. They want to know why humans solve problems that other species can't solve. Kate remembered her first meeting with Zephyrian diplomats 15 years ago. They had been so impressed with human creativity and determination. They said humans were special, that they could do things no other species could do. Kate had felt proud. Now she understood they weren't complimenting humanity. They were studying humanity like scientists study lab rats. There's more, Dr. Foster said. She picked up another paper, but her hands were shaking. The experiments aren't just about understanding us. They're about controlling us. The Zephyrians are afraid of what humans might become if we're left alone. Afraid of us? Captain Parker laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. We barely have 50 ships that can travel between stars. Most of our colonies have less than 10,000 people. What could they possibly be afraid of? Dr. Foster turned on her computer and put a chart on the big screen. This shows problem-solving test results from different species across the galaxy. Humans score higher than any other species, even ones that have been traveling in space for thousands of years. The chart showed bars of different heights. The bar for humans was twice as tall as any other species. Every major breakthrough in galactic technology in the past 15 years came from human scientists working with alien materials. Dr. Foster continued. Faster engines, better shields, new medicines that work on multiple species. Humans didn't just join galactic civilization. We started improving it. Kate stared at the chart. They brought us into the galaxy not as partners, but as tools. They wanted to use our minds to solve their problems. Exactly. But tools can become weapons if you're not careful. The Zephyrians realized that humans don't just solve problems better than other species. We also fight differently. We never give up, even when we should. General Rodriguez leaned forward. What do you mean? Every other species in the galaxy fights until fighting becomes too expensive. Then they surrender or negotiate. Humans fight until they win or die. The Zephyrians have been studying our military history. They're terrified of what humans might do if we ever decided they were our enemies. Kate felt something cold and angry growing in her chest. So they decided to control. Use first. Take our people, study our brains, figure out how to beat us before we became a threat. The irony is perfect, Dr. Foster said. By enslaving us, they guaranteed that we would become exactly what they were afraid of. They turned us into their enemies. Captain Parker walked back to his chair. What's our current military strength? Compared to theirs? Kate pulled up another file on her tablet. Not good. The Zephyrians have over 3,000 warships. We have 47 ships that could fight, and most of those are converted cargo vessels. Their technology is 50 years ahead of ours. So we can't win a direct fight, General Rodriguez said. Not yet, Kate agreed. But we have advantages they don't know about. Dr. Foster nodded. The files Morrison found show that the Zephyrians still don't really understand humans. They see our creativity and determination, but they don't understand where it comes from. They think it's something in our brains that they can copy or control. But it's not, Kate said, beginning to understand. No, human creativity comes from the way we work together. Other species are individuals first, then part of a group. Humans are different. We're part of the group first, then individuals. When you threaten one human, you threaten all humans. The Zephyrians don't understand that, because no other species works that way. Kate stood up and walked to the window. Even though it only showed the underground parking garage, they've been taking our people for 20 years, and we didn't know. But now we do know. What are you thinking, Kate? General Rodriguez asked. Kate turned back to face the room. I'm thinking about what happens when 2.5 million humans come home and tell their families what the Zephyrians did to them. I'm thinking about what happens when every human in the galaxy learns that our trusted allies have been selling our children. Captain Parker smiled, and it was not a nice smile. The Zephyrians are about to learn what human determination really looks like. Dr. Foster picked up her papers. There's something else. The Zephyrians aren't the only ones involved. They sell humans to dozens of other species across the galaxy. Humans are working as slaves on 47 different worlds. Which means 47 different species are about to become our enemies. General Rodriguez said. Kate walked back to the table. No, 47 different species are about to learn what happens when you make enemies of humans. Amy, how integrated are humans into galactic society? Dr. Foster typed on her computer. Very integrated. Humans run most of the major trade routes because we're better at solving logistical problems. Human doctors work in hospitals across the galaxy because we're the only species that can understand medical problems affecting multiple alien races. Human engineers design most of the new technology because we think of solutions that other species miss. So if humans suddenly disappeared from galactic society, what would happen? Complete chaos. The economy would collapse. Medical research would stop. Most major construction projects would fail. Kate nodded slowly. But we're not going to disappear. We're going to go home. All of us. Every human in the galaxy is coming back to human space. And then what? Captain Parker asked. Kate looked around the room at the faces of Earth's military leaders. They were all thinking the same thing she was thinking. The Zephyrians had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were controlling humanity, but they had actually been setting up their own destruction. Then we show the galaxy what humans do to species that enslave our people, Kate said. We show them that taking one human means going to war with all humans. General Rodriguez nodded. How long do we have before they realize what we're planning? Not long. As soon as we start pulling humans out of the galaxy, they'll know something is wrong. We need to move fast. Dr. Foster closed her computer. Kate, are you sure about this? We're talking about going to war with most of the galaxy. Kate looked at the pictures still showing on the big screen. Humans floating in tanks, being sold like animals, having their brains studied like specimens. Amy, they've been at war with us for 20 years. We just didn't know it. Now we do. She picked up her phone and dialed the number. Get me President Collins. Tell him it's time to bring our people home. Ambassador Elena Martinez walked into the biggest meeting room she had ever seen. The walls curved up and up until they almost met at the top, like being inside a giant egg. Hundreds of seats filled the room in a big circle, and in each seat sat a creature from a different world. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra arms. Others looked like giant insects or walking trees, or things that Elena couldn't even describe. The air smelled like a mix of perfumes and chemicals, and something that reminded her of the ocean dot. In the center of the circle sat the Zephyrian representatives. High Counselor Vexstar was their leader, and Elena had met him many times before. He always smiled with his small mouth and spoke in a voice that sounded like singing. His blue skin seemed to glow under the bright lights, and his 6 arms moved gracefully as he talked. Elena had always thought he was beautiful in a strange alien way. Now she knew what he really was. The room went quiet as Elena walked to the center where humans were supposed to speak. She carried a small device that would project pictures and sounds for everyone to see. Her hands were steady, but her heart was beating fast. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Trade Federation," she began, her voice echoing in the huge room. "I come before you today with evidence of the greatest crime in galactic history." Vexstar stood up from his crystalline seat. When he spoke, a machine translated his singing voice into words that everyone could understand. "Honored human delegate, we are always happy to hear from our newest galactic partners. What concerns bring you before the council today?" Elena looked at his face. He seemed curious and friendly, just like always. If she didn't know what she knew, she would still think he was a good person trying to help humanity. "Counselor Vexstar, 3 days ago, human military forces discovered a Zephyrian cargo ship in the Kepler system. We found something on that ship that changes everything." She activated her device. The air above the center of the room filled with pictures from Jake Morrison's mission. The containers holding sleeping humans appeared in the air, so real that Elena could almost touch them. The room filled with sounds of surprise and shock. Some representatives made noises like gasps, others like growls or clicks or sounds Elena had never heard before. The Altarian delegate, a tall figure whose skin changed colors with her emotions, turned from blue to deep red. "What are we looking at?" asked the representative from the Crystalline Collective. His voice sounded like glass breaking. "These are human beings," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. 237 people. From the colony ship Bright Star. They were supposed to be traveling to a new home. Instead, they were captured, drugged, and prepared for sale. Vexstar's translator made his response sound confused and hurt. "Ambassador Martinez, surely there has been some terrible mistake. The Bright Star colony was lost to a plague. We brought you the medical records ourselves." Elena smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Yes, you did. You also brought us bodies to prove that everyone had died. What you didn't tell us was that those bodies came from humans who died during your experiments." She activated the next part of her presentation. Computer files filled the air, showing lists of names, ages, and prices. Each name was a human being. Each price was what someone had paid to own them. According to your own records, the Zephyrian Empire has been capturing and selling humans for 23 years. 2.4 million people have been taken from their families and sold as slaves across 47 different worlds. The noise in the room grew louder. Representatives were talking to each other in dozens of different languages. Elena could see anger and disgust on many faces, but she could also see fear on others. The representative from the Aquatic Federation made a sound like a whale song. "This cannot be true. The Federation has laws against slavery. Any species caught trafficking sentience faces immediate expulsion and military action." Vexstar stood up again. And this time his 6 arms spread wide in a gesture that Elena had learned meant innocence and peace. My fellow counselors, the humans are clearly confused. These individuals volunteered for our research programs. They are well compensated and receive excellent medical care. Elena let him finish speaking. Then she activated the audio files. The room filled with the sound of human screaming. Men and women and children crying for help, begging to go home, calling out names of family members they would never see again. The sounds echoed off the curved walls and seemed to come from everywhere at once. When the audio stopped, the room was completely silent. Do those sound like volunteers to you? Elena asked. The crystalline representative stood up. His body was made of living rock that sparkled under the lights. This is an abomination. If these charges are true, the Zephyrians must face the full punishment of galactic law. Other representatives began to stand and speak. Elena heard words of anger and disgust in languages she couldn't understand, but the emotion was clear in every voice. But Vextar remained calm. He waited for the room to get quiet again and spoke in his singing voice that the translators made sound almost amused. And what does humanity propose to do about these accusations? He asked. You are a young species with barely 50 ships capable of interstellar travel. Your colonies are scattered and poorly defended. Your technology is centuries behind most Federation species. You have no significant military presence in the galaxy. What power do you have to demand anything from anyone? Elena had been waiting for this question. She looked around the room at all the alien faces watching her. Some looked curious, others looked worried. Many looked like they were wondering the same thing as Vextar. Counselor, you've been studying humans for over 20 years. You've experimented on our people, analyzed our brains, tried to understand what makes us different from other species. But you made one big mistake. And what mistake is that? Vextar asked. Elena activated the final part of her presentation. New images appeared in the air, showing human colonies, research stations, trading posts, and ships throughout the galaxy. You assumed that because we have less advanced technology, we are less important to galactic civilization. But look at these images. Look at where humans work and what humans do. The pictures showed human doctors in alien hospitals, human engineers building massive space stations, human traders managing supply routes between different worlds, human scientists working in research labs across the galaxy. In the 15 years since first contact, humans have become essential to galactic society. We run 70% of the major trade routes because we're better at solving logistics problems than any other species. Human doctors work in hospitals across the galaxy because we're the only species that can understand medical issues affecting multiple alien races. Human engineers design most of your new technology because we think of solutions that other species miss. Elena paused and looked directly at Vextar. You didn't make humans your slaves, Counselor. You made the galaxy dependent on human slaves. The room was getting noisy again as representatives began to understand what Elena was saying. So what happens? Elena continued. When all the humans suddenly go home? What happens when every human, doctor, engineer, trader, and scientist in the galaxy returns to human space? What happens when the species you've been enslaving decides to stop helping you? The Altarian representative had turned from red to a sick yellow color. The trade routes would collapse. Medical research would stop. Construction projects would fail. Exactly, Elena said. And that's not even the worst part. Vextar leaned forward. For the first time since Elena had started speaking, he looked worried. What do you mean? Elena smiled again, and this time it was genuinely happy. The worst part is what happens when 2.5 million humans come home and tell their families what you did to them. The worst part is what happens when every human in the galaxy learns that the species they trusted The species they worked with, the species they considered friends, had been selling their children. She looked around the room one more time. You see, counselor, you never understood the most important thing about humans. We don't see ourselves as individuals first and part of a group second, like other species do. We're part of the group first, individual second. When you hurt one human, you hurt all humans. When you enslave one human, you go to war with all humans. Vexstar's skin was no longer glowing. It had turned a dull gray color that Elena had never seen before. You wanted to study what makes humans different, Elena said. Congratulations. You're about to get a very detailed lesson. The message went out to every human in the galaxy at exactly the same time. On colony worlds, research stations, trading ships, and mining platforms, every screen, every radio, and every communication device showed the same thing. Admiral Kate. Sullivan's face appeared with the flag of Earth behind her. Her words were simple and clear. Citizens of humanity, we have learned the truth about our place in the galaxy. The Zephyrians and their allies have been taking our people as slaves for over 20 years. 2.5 million humans are being held against their will across 47 worlds. As of this moment, humanity is withdrawing from all alien contact. Every human ship must return to Earth immediately. All trade agreements are canceled. Any alien vessel that approaches human space will be considered an enemy. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Gary Thompson watched the message on the small screen in his control room. Around him, massive machines dug deep into the planet's surface, pulling out rare metals that were worth more than gold back on Earth. The Ziphians had given humans the technology to mine these metals, but they needed human operators because the work was too complex for automated systems. Gary had been running this mining operation for 3 years. He had a crew of 200 humans who worked in shifts around the clock. They were supposed to stay here for 5 more years, sending the rare metals back to Zephyrian space in exchange for advanced technology and new colony rights for humanity. Now Gary understood the truth. The metals weren't payment for technology. They were being mined by slave labor, just like his missing brother Tony had been slave labor on some other world. Gary walked to the main control panel and pressed the emergency shutdown button. All across the planet, mining machines stopped digging. Conveyor belts stopped moving. Processing plants went quiet. In 10 minutes, an operation that had been running non-stop for 3 years was completely dead. His radio crackled with confused voices from his work crews. Gary, what's happening? Why did everything stop? Pack your personal stuff, Gary said into the radio. We're going home. Right now. On the research station orbiting Vega Prime, Dr. Rachel Green was working on the most important medical project in the galaxy. 12 different alien species had been dying from a disease that attacked their nervous systems. Human doctors were the only ones who could understand how the disease affected so many different types of biology. Rachel had been working for 2 years to develop a cure. She was close, maybe only weeks away from a breakthrough that would save millions of alien lives. When Admiral Sullivan's message finished playing, Rachel looked at her research data for a long moment. Then she deleted everything. 2 years of work, research that could save entire species, gone in seconds. Rachel's alien assistants made shocked sounds as they watched their life's work disappear from the computer screens. Dr. Green, what are you doing? Asked Dr. Vexnell, a Zephyrian scientist who had worked with Rachel since the project began. The cure is almost ready. Millions will die without your research. Rachel looked at the alien who had been her friend and colleague. Vexnell had always been kind to her, had shared meals with her, had even shown her pictures of his family. But now Rachel wondered if Vexnell knew the truth about what his people had been doing to humans. Millions of humans have already died in your slave camps, Rachel said. Figure out your own cure. She walked out of the laboratory and headed for the human transport ship that would take her home. Captain Roy Bennett commanded the cargo ship New Horizon, which carried goods between human and alien worlds. His ship was big and slow, designed for carrying large amounts of cargo safely rather than for fighting. But Roy had been in the military before he became a trader, and he remembered how to fight. When Admiral Sullivan's message ended, Roy was already planning his route back to Earth. The problem was that 3 Zephyrian patrol ships were moving to intercept him. Their ships were faster and had better weapons, but Roy had something they didn't have. He had 200 tons of industrial explosives in his cargo hold. Captain, his first officer, Jenny Walsh, said from her station, "The Zephyrians are hailing. U.S. They want us to stop and prepare for boarding." Roy looked at the tactical display showing the 3 enemy ships closing in on his position. In a normal fight, his cargo ship wouldn't stand a chance. But this wasn't going to be a normal fight. "Jenny, remember your daughter Sarah, who's in college back on Earth?" Roy asked. "Of course I remember her. Why?" "According to those files from Admiral Sullivan, Sarah's age group has been specifically targeted for Zephyrian slave raids. There's a 70% chance that if we don't make it home, Sarah will disappear within 6 months." Jenny's face went white, then red with anger. "What do you need me to do, Captain?" Roy smiled grimly. "I need you to help me show these aliens what happens when you threaten human children." Roy turned his ship toward the nearest Zephyrian patrol vessel and pushed the engines to maximum power. The Zephyrians probably expected him to try to run away or surrender. They didn't expect him to attack. The patrol ship's shields flared as Roy's cargo ship crashed into them. The shields held, but they weren't designed to stop a ship loaded with explosives. Roy triggered the detonation just as his ship made contact. The explosion lit up space like a small sun. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but Roy and Jenny had escaped in the last second using their emergency pods. As they drifted in space, waiting for rescue. Jenny looked at the wreckage of the Zephyrian ship. "Roy, we just started a war." "No," Roy said, watching the debris burn. "They started the war 20 years ago. We just decided to fight back." Similar scenes were happening all across the galaxy. On the agricultural world of Tau Ceti, human farmers destroyed their crops rather than let aliens harvest them. Human-designed factories shut down when their human operators went home. Space stations that had been built by human engineers began to fall apart without human maintenance. Dr. Lisa Carter, who had been with Jake Morrison when they first discovered the slave ship, was working at the Galactic Medical Research Center. When the message came through, she was part of a team trying to understand why humans were immune to diseases that killed other species. She understood why the research was so important to the aliens. They wanted to know how to make humans sick so they could control them better. Lisa walked to the main computer that held all the research data about human immunity. The information in this computer could help save human lives if aliens ever tried to attack Earth with biological weapons. But it could also help aliens create new diseases that would only affect humans. Lisa entered her access codes and began copying the files to a portable storage device. But instead of copying the real research, she replaced all the data with false information that would confuse any alien scientist who tried to use it. When she was done, the aliens would have research data that looked real but would actually make any disease they created harmless to humans. It was a gift that would keep giving long after Lisa was safely back on Earth. All across the galaxy, humans were making similar choices. They were choosing their own people over the aliens who had trusted them, worked with them, and called them friends. They were choosing to go to war rather than accept slavery. The galaxy had depended on human creativity, human determination, and human problem-solving abilities. Now humans were using all those abilities against their former allies. Captain Nick. Parker, watching reports come in from across the galaxy, smiled as he read about each act of sabotage and rebellion. "They wanted to study what makes humans special," he said to Admiral Sullivan. "I hope they're taking good notes." Within 24 hours, the galactic economy began to collapse. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly couldn't function without human operators. Research projects that were close to breakthrough discoveries stopped when human scientists went home. Construction projects ground to a halt without human engineers, but the worst was yet to come. As human ships began arriving back in Earth space, they brought with them the rescued slaves from the hidden camps. 2.5 million angry humans who had stories to tell about what had been done to them. The galaxy was about to learn that enslaving humans hadn't just been wrong. It had been the worst mistake any species could make. 6 months later, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the battleship Terra's Wrath and watched the last Zephyrian stronghold surrender. The massive space station that had once been the center of the Zephyrian slave trade was now surrounded by human warships. White flags of surrender flew from every docking port. The past 6 months had been the fastest military buildup in human history. Every factory on Earth, Mars, and the Moon had been converted to making warships and weapons. Humans who had been miners and farmers and shopkeepers 6 months ago were now soldiers and pilots and engineers building the largest fleet Earth had ever seen. Commander Jake Morrison walked up to Kate with a tablet in his hands. His face looked older than it had 6 months ago, with new lines around his eyes from the things he had seen during the rescue missions. "Final numbers, Admiral," he said, his voice tired but satisfied. "We've rescued 2,287,000 humans from 43 different worlds. We're still looking for the rest, but we've shut down every major slave operation in this part of the galaxy." Kate nodded and looked at the tablet. Each number represented a person who had been taken from their family and sold like an animal. Each number was someone's child, parent, brother, or sister who had spent years wondering if they would ever see home again. "Casualties?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be hard to hear. About 200,000 people didn't survive the slave camps. Disease, medical experiments, accidents. The Zephyrians didn't take very good care of their property. Kate closed her eyes for a moment. 200,000 people who would never go home to their families. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never see their kids again. The number was so big, it was hard to understand, but Kate forced herself to think about each one. "What's the status of the Zephyrian Empire?" she asked. Jake looked at another part of his tablet. "Complete collapse. Without human workers, their economy fell apart in 3 months. Most of their colonies have declared independence or joined other species for protection. The central government only controls about 12 star systems now, down from over 300. Kate turned to look at the view screen, where she could see human rescue ships loading the last group of freed slaves. Many of these people had been in captivity for decades, but their eyes still burned with the same anger that had driven humanity to this moment. Dr. Lisa Carter approached from the science station, carrying her own report. "Admiral, I've finished analyzing the psychological effects of the rescue operations. The results are interesting." "Tell me," Kate said. "The freed slaves aren't broken or defeated like you might expect. Instead, they're angrier than the people who came to rescue them. 20 years of captivity didn't make them give up. It made them more determined to fight back." Kate wasn't surprised. She had talked to hundreds of the rescued humans over the past months. Instead of being grateful just to be free, most of them wanted to join the military and help hunt down the aliens who had enslaved them. "Any word from the other species?" Kate asked. Jake checked another section of his tablet. 17 different species have asked for peace talks with Earth. They want new trade agreements to replace the ones we canceled. The Altarians are offering us complete access to their technology if we'll restart the medical research programs. And our answer? The same as always. We'll trade with species that treat humans as equals. We'll go to war with species that treat humans as property. No middle ground. A communication officer called out from across the bridge. Admiral, we're getting a transmission from Earth. President Collins is ready to address the galaxy. The main screen changed to show President Collins in the Oval Office. Behind him were the flags of Earth and the new Human Colonial Alliance that now included 27 human worlds. His face was serious, but Kate could see satisfaction in his eyes. Citizens of Earth and people of the galaxy, the president began. 6 months ago, humanity learned that species we considered friends had been enslaving our people for over 20 years. Today, that injustice has been corrected. The camera pulled back to show that President Collins was not alone. Behind him stood dozens of people who had been rescued from the slave camps. Men and women of all ages, some with scars from medical experiments, others with the pale skin of people who had spent years underground. All of them stood proud and strong. These are some of the humans who were taken from their families and sold as slaves. They survived because they never forgot who they were and where they came from. They survived because they knew that other humans would never stop looking for them. President Collins stepped forward, closer to the camera. To the species of the galaxy who still hold human slaves, you have 24 hours to release them and return them to human space. Any species found holding humans after that deadline will be considered at war with humanity. Kate smiled as she watched the president's speech. In the past 6 months, humanity had gone from a small, weak species, begging for acceptance to the most feared military power in this part of the galaxy. Not because they had the best technology or the most ships, but because they had something no other species understood. They had the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect their own people. Admiral, the communication officer called out. Again, we're getting surrender messages from 12 different species. They're offering to return all human slaves immediately if we promise not to attack them. Tell them they have 18 hours left, Kate said. And tell them that the promise not to attack depends on how well they treat our people during the transfer. Dr. Carter looked up from her tablet. Kate, there's something else you should know. The psychological profiles we've done on the rescued slaves show something unexpected. What's that? They don't want to go back to their old lives. Most of them want to join the Colonial Defense Force or the Exploration Service. They want to help find other humans who might still be missing, and they want to make sure this never happens again. Kate wasn't surprised by this either. Humans who had been enslaved wouldn't be satisfied with just being free. They would want to make sure no other human ever went through what they had experienced. Commander Morrison pointed to the view screen where the rescue ships were finishing their work. You know what the ironic part is? The Zephyrians were right to be afraid of us. They just made the mistake of giving us a reason to be everything they feared. Kate nodded. They wanted to study human determination and creativity. They got a very thorough education. A new message appeared on Kate's tablet. It was from the Galactic Trade Federation, asking for peace negotiations. They offered to pay reparations for the enslaved humans and to change galactic law to make slavery punishable by military action. Kate deleted the message without reading all of it. Admiral, Jake asked, aren't you going to respond to the Federation? Eventually, Kate said, but not yet. They spent 20 years pretending they didn't know what was happening to humans. They can spend a few more months wondering what we're going to do about it. She looked out at the stars through the view screen. Somewhere out there were human colonies that would need protection. Somewhere out there might be more humans who needed rescue. And somewhere out there were species that still thought they could treat humans as less than equal. Jake, what's our next target? He checked his tablet one more time. Intelligence reports suggest there might be a hidden slave market in the Rigel system. Small operation, maybe only a few thousand humans, but they're supposed to be selling people to species that don't officially exist. Kate smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Set course for Rigel. It's time to teach some more aliens. What happens when you mess with humans? As the Terra's wrath turned toward the stars, Kate thought about the message this would send to the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the weak, grateful species that had begged for acceptance 15 years ago. They were no longer the naive people who trusted that their alien friends had their best interests at heart. They were humans, and they protected their own. Anyone who forgot that lesson would learn it the hard way. The age of human slavery was over. The age of human justice had begun.